fucking master!
Not today, you New World Order jackboot.
My name's Frank.
Here's the thing, Frank. If I feed you, then every bum you talk to about it is gonna show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's.
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch. It was a restaurant.
Sooner or later, there'll be raiders. They'll come at night, quiet and armed.
Call Joel. We'll be fine.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Brickmasters podcast, a recap show for the hit HBO series, The Last of Us. I'm your host, Chris Lamberth. With me, as always, on this endeavor is my wonderful co-host, Dr. Veronica Paredes. How are you, Veronica?
Doing well, Chris. Excited to talk about this prestige episode of Last of Us. Best television in the last... since the invention of television, I think.
That we've ever seen. The best episode of television that's ever been made. What did you think?
Yes.
What'd you think of this?
I think it's pretty well done. As a bottle episode, it's really successful for having seen examples of this in other series. I think it does a really nice job of telling this love story. I'm excited to get into it. I think there'll be tensions between game players and like exclusively show watchers that'll be highlighted maybe in this episode.
Oh yeah, I saw some the gamers, hardcore gamers that I follow that were upset.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Because it was.
What'd you think?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I'm just trying not to be that I'm trying not to be that contrarian. That's like the best ever, really. And then part of me is like, are you saying this because it's a story that's, I mean, this is 2023, that it's conventional now, you know, to me, it's a part of our culture. It's a part of society. I mean, what are we like 20 years removed from Will and Grace now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. There's been like gay people on Real World. I remember when I used to watch that. So I think the LGBTQIA community is prevalent in the culture. We still have work to do in that regard as far as treating them right and stuff like that. But sometimes I think sometimes people use art to show that they're good people and to really like heap on all the praise because this is a episode featuring characters like this. And I don't think I'm dancing on landmines here, but I've gone on record even before we started this podcast as saying that Ellie, we later find that Ellie's gay, and she's my favorite video game character of all time. She edged out Lara Croft, and I have several figurines of Ellie in my apartment. So I'm not like hating on this, and it's not because Ellie is a woman, and we saw the male homosexuality on the show last night. I just think sometimes people are trying to do a little too much. And at the same time, I thought that the episode we were texting last night, that episode of Dahmer, I think it was episode 6, with the black deaf gentleman he killed, that Dahmer killed, was some of the best TV I've ever seen. Just in the way that but then am I being a hypocrite? Maybe I am.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
It's a complicated set of questions, and we've been kind of skating around it, thinking about representation
Right.
and the changing of the character of Joel from like a white American, just obvious or kind of like a seemingly very black and white American guy
Mhm.
to being performed by Pedro Pascal and having potentially, Latino heritage. So, that question about representation that we brought up, and then this question of like, what does it mean to represent, a gay love story of this sort? And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of things at play though here. It's not just that, they portrayed that kind of love story. There's also the way that love into midlife, into death is also not frequently represented, and
Mm.
even less so
Right.
represented with gay characters. So I think that's what I was kind of personally touched by in the episode, was like that they grow old, right? All the stuff
Sure.
around aging, all the stuff around aging. So I mean, I think that it becomes polarized because the discourse around it, and I can see like being annoyed by the self-congratulatory,
There it is. Yeah.
self-aggrandizing kind of
Mhm.
spirit of like seemingly like awards bait, right? Like Emmy
Yeah.
bait kind of thing. That being said, I feel like it did have its moments. It was well performed.
Yes.
And it was well written and like the set design. There's a lot of care in a lot of different aspects of it that are pretty obvious. So I don't know. It's complicated. It's not like just a kind of easy to describe or easy to like dismiss or easy to congratulate kind of thing. I mean, I think I feel kind of similar about Dahmer in that I did watch that episode, but I felt strange watching the whole series because of all of the discourse that was surrounding that. And then, yeah, like you're saying, the same kind of accusation of self-aggrandizement or self-congratulations can happen about representing deaf characters on TV, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's a complicated set of questions, a nest of I don't know. Is it a nest of can of worms? A bunch of little fungi that are kind of growing and connecting to other questions.
Yeah, I think so. As a nice tapestry of that. Yeah, I think it brings up all those things. I would just be remiss if I didn't bring it up because I feel the same way about what we'll see later on at the end of the season is where I find my most anger or at people that I think are being self-aggrandizing or being a little sanctimonious about things.
Yeah.
When they're not thinking about the given circumstances of the world that Druckmann and Mason are presenting to us, to where it just, to me, it just kind of seems like, oh, I see how a certain character got from A to Z when when that person did the things that they did, So,
well, yeah, and this is part of that journey. Like this is also all part of Joel's journey, and I think there are a lot of interesting things that Mason and Druckmann are putting in there that I'm not sure I agree with, but it's interesting their storytelling. So we'll get into it.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's start off this episode. This is episode 3 of the series called Long, Long Time, directed by Peter Hoare and written by Craig Mazin. No cold open with this one, but I just assumed when it just went to the title, I just said, well, we're going to get a flashback when we're going to get plenty of them. So that was not a surprise, although I love the cold opens, and it doesn't mean that they won't come back to those. But yeah, so I really was fascinated by that. It's morning, dawn, I guess dawn. Can you say that? Dawn?
Yeah, sunrise.
Yeah, sunrise. Yeah. Joel is stacking some rocks from a river. He's looking at his hand that he used to beat the shit out of that guard from episode 1, his hairline fracture. and he's stacking rocks, and they say he's essentially building a memorial for Tess. It's often a symbol of like a sign of patience, connection with the earth, but overall he's mourning Tess. And we get a card, like not necessarily a title card, but a description that says they're 10 miles west of Boston. Ellie says she's never been in the woods. And she's sitting there, and she's basically, I think she's lying in this scene. She's saying like, "Oh, nobody made you or Tess take me. You guys wanted a battery, and don't blame me for something that isn't my fault." I think she just feels guilty because she feels guilty, and she doesn't want to say anything. So that's why she doesn't want to say that she feels guilty. So that's why she lashes out. Joel takes I don't know what the hell that is, like some kind of jerky. He's eating off some of it, and he throws it at Ellie so she can get some. She's covered in his coat, his jacket, and to keep herself warm. That's already a sign of him, warming up to her, regardless of what she's saying there. He's heard it before. He's heard stuff like that. Worse. He's heard a lot worse. It tells her there's a 5-hour hike to get to Bill and Frank's. And Ellie says, "Oh, you gone this way a lot?" And he says, "Yeah, the little small talk." She asks how he got the scar on his head. He says somebody shot him and missed. And she's like, "Whoa." And they go back and forth about that. Joel's like looking around. She says, "What are you looking for? Infected?" He says, "No, people." And
Message.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And so they're walking. Ellie asks for a gun, and again, and Joel says no. So they get to a Cumberland Farms, which is a real convenience store. If you live in the Northeast, it's a nice convenience store. I've been to a few and got some gas there. Convenience store. It's essentially his stash house. Ellie sees this arcade cabinet. Have you ever heard that term before? Arcade cabinet?
No, but yeah, it makes total sense.
That's what people
it would be called.
Yeah, that's what they call it on. That's what they describe it as. And it's Mortal Kombat 2. And she references one of the characters in the game, Melina, I believe, that like can eat people. And she references somebody like a friend that knew all about the game, and she's referencing Riley, which is my most anticipated episode coming up. I think that's episode 8 or something. Anyway, but in the DLC, there's a moment where you're just like, okay, yeah, that's a part in the game. And it's been a couple of years since Joel's been there, so he's not sure where he left this stuff. Some of the stuff's been picked over. Ellie goes looking around, and she's going in there. She says, "Anything bad in there?" And Joel says, "Just you." And then another, joke from a callback from episode 2. She's in another room. She finds like a little trap door, or it's not necessarily a trap door, but it's like those lids in New York. What do you call those things? Like, you go down into the basement or the cellar, like kind of like a cellar door. Yeah.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a cellar door down there and up there, and she goes down there. She after she checks it, she throws something down, she sees how deep it is, sees how deep it is, shines her flashlight. Everything seems to be okay. She hops down there, and then she turns a trash can upside down to give herself a way to get out. She's looking around. She sees a shelf with some tampons on it. That's not in the video game. She sees some tampons. She's like, yeah, she sees, and she gets them. Then you hear an infected snarl. She shines her flashlight over. There's an infected that's trapped under some debris that's collapsed. Probably that is a stalker, I believe. And he can't get out. So he's mutated into a stalker.
Okay, and a stalker is different than a runner.
Yeah, the stalker is the second stage. Okay. And she goes over there, she inspects it, and she you can only see like his little part of his hand, and then his head is sticking out, and she takes out her switchblade and slices his forehead a little bit, and you can see fungus growing out of the cut. So he's essentially one of those damn near a mushroom plant. Then she stabs him, kind of to just take him out. I don't know if she's taking him out of his misery or just doing it to just say like, I'm not afraid of you, or just like, I don't need to hear your shit. I'm going to kill you. What do you think? We'll go. We'll finish this and we'll go. So then we cut to Joel. He's still looking for stuff. He calls out after Ellie. He doesn't hear anything. Then he draws his gun, about to go in the room where Ellie was. Then Ellie comes out and says, "Picked over my ass." She finds the tampons. Joel stores his machine gun away because there's not much ammo for it out there, so it would make that machine gun practically useless. They walk past a crash. They walk past a crashed airplane. Ellie says, "You ever been in one?" Joel says, "Yeah, a few times." "You're so lucky." And then Joel says, "It didn't feel like it. Got stuffed into a middle seat. Paid $12 for a sandwich." And Ellie's like, "Dude, you got to go up in the sky," which reminds me of like a Louis C.K. bit that he had. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, and then Joel says, "Yeah, well, so did they." And Ellie's like, "Grim." What'd you think about this first this sequence here, these first couple scenes?
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on about character development. They're starting to build a rapport. They're making jokes with one another. I was curious about this like intertextual game reference, right, to Mortal Kombat, and I looked up that in the game there's another arcade cabinet that's The Turning.
The Turning, yeah, right? That's the game that's in Left Behind.
Okay.
And then Ellie and Riley pretend to play it, and you can get a trophy out of that when you play it in the DLC. And then also when Riley sneaks into Ellie's room in Left Behind, Ellie has a Mortal Kombat 2 poster on her wall, and it's like Warner Brothers is the studio that produced that movie, so it's cross referencing, right, or cross promotion or whatever. So
right. And it's also just interesting to think about how, in the absence of actually being able to play these video games, which I imagine these kids wouldn't have been able to imagine, how they transmitted or shared or circulated the stories in these video games without them being functional. So that was interesting. The stalker is interesting, just the way that it's like, yeah, she's very smart about the way she moves. And I thought that even the like physicality or the staging of like how Bella Ramsey moved in that space was pretty, she just seems like she's becoming more like convincing as Ellie and more kind of like sharing herself a bit more with Joel.
Yeah.
And it seems easier between them two.
I'm loving her. And I just like, I wasn't as upset as some of the gamers were about the casting because she doesn't look like Ellie. They kind of fashioned Ellie as kind of like Ellen Page, or the artist formerly known as Ellen Page. Now Elliot, don't cancel me. And so you kind of get like harped in on that, but like the more that every time she opens her mouth, as this show starts progressing, it's like she becomes like Ellie. She is Ellie. She's adorable. She's precocious, and she's really playing that up. So I'm excited to see the transition that's going to happen later on in the series. So I think she's doing a terrific job.
She's also off-putting. She's a little strange, right? Like when he says you're a weird kid. And that she brings in that kind of character that she played in Game of Thrones, which is like very precocious and very ferocious, like very powerful, despite being so small. She's like 11 in Game of Thrones. But the ruler and the heir, the ruling heir of her family, of her house. And I think that there's just like there is something off, and I think that's good for a character like Ellie to like have that kind of bit of like foreshadowing of like, this is kind of, it's something hidden here, like, she can a monster who will use her teeth to bite you all up and spit out your bones. I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating, fun to watch her change. And I'm all about it. I think she's doing a great job. Okay, so they're walking. Ellie asks about how everything fell apart. She said, I bet it's monkeys. Joel tells her about the flour and sugar product contamination that happened all over the world, how it essentially started on a Thursday and everything was like fucked up by Monday. And that just really brings home, again, everybody who had that flour theory was on point. And it's a great way to explain it to her, you know. And Joel wants to cut across the woods because he says there's things that she shouldn't see. Ellie wants to go the way that they're going, so they continue down the road, and then we see these skeletons of people who didn't seem like they were sick, and they weren't. And Joel says they were killed by soldiers that claimed they were taking them to the QZ if they had room. And if they didn't, they were killed. And Ellie says, why kill them if they're not infected? Joel says, because dead people can't be infected. And then we get a flashback to September 30th, 2003, a black woman holding a baby. And we see the remnants of her clothing in the previous scene, and a little kid's skeleton, I guess. And so they've essentially been murdered right outside of town. They didn't really get far. This is Lincoln, Massachusetts, and the town's being evacuated. There's soldiers on a radio. You see a man who we soon will find is Bill. He's looking in the cameras, which seem to be in a bunker. And he looks like this dude is a doomsday prepper. And he's looking on the camera. He says, not today, you New World Order jackboot fucks. Low-key reminds me of like after everybody's gone, he comes outside with his mask on and his shotgun, and he sees that everybody's gone. He kind of gives a smile on his face and cues up to the music the music is the needle drop, if you will, is I'm Coming Home to Stay by Fleetwood Mac from 1968, which means that everything's good, you know. There's a montage of him filling his truck and boat with gas. He goes to Home Depot, gets some supplies. The power goes out. He says, that was fast. Crashes the gates at a gas plant. Gets some, does that. He goes to Lincoln Wine and Spirits, takes some wine. He powers up a generator that he made in his backyard, chops some wood, makes some traps. He's planting vegetables and farming, raising chickens. Then you cut to him eating a nice dinner until he hears an alarm. It's an infected falls, which looks like a runner, falls victim to one of his booby traps, and he says, "It doesn't get old." And the infected looked like a brown dude, I thought. Yeah. So anyway, message anyway, this reminded me, this montage, and I'll let you take over, reminded me of The Last Man on Earth, the Will Forte show. Like it's not as wacky as that, obviously, but it gave me those vibes. And you see that a lot in these apocalyptic movies and TV shows. Yeah.
Right. Classic science fiction scenario. Omega Man. What was the Will Smith movie that was based on that Omega Man?
Oh God.
It was a remake.
Yeah.
The dog with the dogs.
Oh, shit.
God.
I just heard them mention. Oh my God. That's so bad. People are screaming at us now. Will Smith, Apocalypse movie. I Am Legend. Jesus Christ.
I Am Legend.
Yeah.
I Am Legend.
And Bill's played by Nick Offerman. Bill's played by Nick Offerman. Go ahead.
Right. And it's kind of, you would imagine an actor like Nick Offerman playing a kind of character like this, someone who knows how to make things, someone who would be happy to be in solitude and, in isolation, who's ready right? And
Right.
that's what that like needle drop mentioned, like is exactly like you said. These are the good times. This is like this is the kind of world that this character is most suited to.
Yeah. Coming home. Let me see if I got I'll be coming home soon, baby. Please be waiting outside your door. I'll be coming home soon, baby. Please be waiting outside your door when I get back with you, baby. Get back with you, baby. You know I ain't gonna leave anymore. You know, so it's like he's staying he's locked in to Lincoln, Mass.
Right.
Yeah. And he wasn't.
Oh, the other thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, his entertainment is kind of not wholesome, right?
No.
He's like, so the other thing about being suited to this world is he's kind of he's violent. This line about the jackboot fucks.
Okay.
I didn't know that is that like something these libertarian type, like the jackboot lingo. I asked my partner, and I guess it was something that like that's something that they say, that it's already a first hint that Bill is politically kind of awaiting the fall of the world, and
Right.
you can imagine what he would have been like in regular society or pre-apocalypse, kind of unpleasant, politically fucked up kind of guy.
Yeah, it's a large leather military boot reaching to the knee, used as a symbol of cruel or authoritarian behavior or rule. A country under the jackboot of colonialism. Yep. I never heard that term until he said he's got a "Don't Tread on Me" flag or something in his.
It'll show up later.
And that we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, he's one of them dudes. So he says it doesn't get old. So then 4 years later, we hear this record White Room by Cream that starts playing. It's 1968. A lot of 1968 stuff going on in this show. Yeah. So that starts playing. He's working. You hear it. He hears another alarm. He's from one of his traps that go off. And I like how they did this, because in the video game, there's tons of traps all over the place for infected or whomever might come around. So he's working. So the alarm goes off, and he sees like there's a guy in a hole, and he goes out. He says, "Are you infected?" He said, "Are you infected?" He said, "I'm not infected." "Are you armed?" "No." He said, "Why did you take that long to answer?" He said, "I thought about lying for some reason, but the reason didn't come." So we see Frank. We find out that he's Frank, and he's played by Murray Bartlett. He's alone. He started out with 10 people from the Baltimore QZ. They all died. They're trying to get to Boston. Baltimore QZ is gone. He asks him, "Are you hurt?" And he says, "Just a bruise." And Bill gives him a ladder to climb up. He climbs up. Bill's got his gun trained on him, and he scans Bill for an infection. Wonder how he got that. Probably maybe the soldier left it behind. I don't think he killed anybody. He could have, but I don't think he did. And he's okay. He's not infected. So he said, he points over to where Boston is. And Frank says, "I'm hungry. I haven't eaten for 2 days." Bill says, "If I feed you, then every bum you talk to is going to come to my place for food like it's an Arby's." Frank says, "Arby's doesn't give out free food. It's a restaurant." Bill takes him in. Bill brings him some clothes and Frank's shower while Frank showers. And he's, "Oh, this is great. This is great." And he says, "Oh, can I have 5 more minutes? This is amazing." So then Frank comes downstairs all washed up. Frank's looking around the dining room until Bill comes in with dinner. He tastes the food. He's like, "What the fuck?" And he's just like, "Oh my God, food's so good." And it's like probably like rabbit and vegetables and stuff. And he says, and then Bill says, "Everything tastes good when you're starving." And Frank's like, "Yeah, but not like this." And it is rabbit with what is it? What's the wine? Beaujolais? How do you pronounce it? Beaujolais?
Oh God.
Beaujolais,
I think we're the second one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Beaujolais. And it's
a special kind of French red wine.
Okay. And I heard someone say it's only like $10. It's not super expensive, but it's only like $10. I know I don't. And then Bill says, I know I don't seem like the type. And Frank's like, no, you do. So Frank can tell that something's going on. Frank thanks Bill for the dinner. He says, I guess I'll be going then. But first, he's been eyeing that piano in the living room, I believe. And he wants to play the piano. It's an antique piano from 1948. He pulls out the song books on the chair, and he pulls out a Linda Ronstadt songbook, and he starts playing and singing "Long, Long Time." 1970 means new stock in, so that means like a new guy treating this man like a piece of meat. And he starts playing he's not very good, and he's like playing like a up tempo kind of version, and he's really bad. And he's like, and he's about to sing that, and then Bill stops him. He's like, hey, look, he says, sorry, I'm not a professional. He's like, neither am I, but Jesus. And then Bill, this is a thing in the game, and I think this is the first time somebody sings to somebody on the show. But you should always pay attention to when somebody's singing to somebody.
Okay.
In this world, I just say keep that out there because it's gonna come up again. And I think maybe we touched on it. Maybe I don't know if you and I talked about this, but maybe Mike and I did in the first one. But Bill starts playing it and singing it at a slower tempo, and it's better than Frank. And it's more of the tempo that the actual song is in, a little slower, a little more deliberate. More like how do you say? Reflective,
it's like melancholic,
reflective,
somber. Yeah.
And okay, after I finish this, and then I'll turn it over to you, and I'll make a statement about it. So, not very good. Bill starts playing it, singing a slower tempo version, better than Frank. Frank asks him, who's the girl he's singing about? And Bill says, there's no girl. And then Frank says, I know. And then they kiss. He says, Frank says, what's your name? Bill. Frank says, go take a shower, Bill. Bill nods, yes. And they eventually go upstairs. Bill takes a shower. And he says, have you ever done this before? He's like, yeah, with a girl. And then he's like, but no, then they have sex. My thing about this,
they commune physically.
Yes, they commune
their hearts with love. Okay.
Exactly. My thing about this is,
what's your thing about this, Chris?
The way that they do this with this game, I feel like we've talked about this before, but I don't want to spoil too much.
I think it's all right. We can say this might be spoiling the series. This might be spoiling the game. If you want, you can skip 30 seconds.
Yes, for about 2 minutes. Skip ahead if you don't want
2 minutes. This. Okay, so 4 30-second things.
Yeah. Okay, maybe. All right. So they have the tendency of doing that, like, you know how like Jordan Peele used to do like the chopped and screwed version of a certain song, or they do like a muted, a slowed down tempo song to promote a movie. We did talk a
little bit about this.
Okay, we did. So like in part 2, like you hear a song like Take On Me from Aha that's like kind of fun and bouncy. Ellie plays a version of that on the guitar, like an acoustic version. There's another song that's in the promotion for part 2 where Ellie is singing another song that is known to be up tempo, but it's tempered down to be more melancholic. So that's kind of of a theme. I just wanted to like kind of put that out there in everybody's brain. I don't know how they're going to do that in other things, but just pay attention every time you hear somebody sing a song or something or mention it. You know, it's always symbolism. And I think it's I just think it's a big moment to me. All right, Veronica, your thoughts.
So the fact that Frank speeds up a melancholic song to be more upbeat is kind of interesting if you think of it in that kind of symbolic way, because Frank is going to be, he's a more social person. He's more out there. He's more extroverted. He's not as available or ready for this world, but does connect with people and is able to function in a world where you need people. And so the kind of like upbeatness or I don't know, there's like something there about it's not making it sadder, it's making it happier. And that's what Frank's going to do.
It's a little, it's messy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's messy in a way, the way that he's singing and the way he's not he's not always on key, but there's a joy in it. Like, and opposites attract, you know what I mean? Like, it's a clear and present thing, and that there's just that they're right for each other. This could be, and it might
be a ploy, by Frank to get Bill to sing. I mean, that could be something that he was doing.
Yeah, because Murray Bartlett is like a class. I don't know if he's classically trained, but he can really sing. But yeah, like it was. I thought it was a great moment. I really liked that.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. And I mean, the whole time, this whole episode, I was kind of on the edge of my seat the first time I watched it, because I was so worried something was going to happen to these two, right? And it's so scary to be so vulnerable in this moment when they kiss. And Murray Bartlett, so good in this episode.
Did you? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Did you think that Frank was up to something?
Always. And no, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that at the first viewing, okay, he's gonna take a shower and then what's gonna happen, potentially in this apocalyptic world, in this kind of, and these disaster survivalist shows, someone's gonna fuck you over if you open it up and if you're too vulnerable, right? So that's what you're worried about the entire time. But then he'd have to be a mastermind of sort, and to show that vulnerability now, looking back on it. But that tear, that like single tear that Murray Bartlett does with the, what is your name? It's so beautiful. It's so nice.
Yeah.
But scary. Yeah. I was scared that something was going to happen.
Yeah. I was, I mean, knowing the game, I didn't know how it would end. I had an idea, but I knew that there was just going to be a relationship. I didn't watching it, haven't played the game and watching it. I didn't think that Frank would do any harm to Bill. But and then because he did before they sleep together, he says, "I'm not a whore. I'm not letting you know I'm not a whore. I don't do this. I don't just like have sex for lunch." like and payment and all that. Like, I'm gonna be here for a while. And
it's a tender scene. Tender scene. They're shirtless, it's so beautiful. The sunlight, the way it's lit, the softness of their, caressing, and they're kind of like in each other's arms. It's just very sweet already.
Yeah. And then we jump to 3 years later, which is one of my favorite things about this series is the editing, and just soon as they're about to have sex, then cut to 3 years later, fuck you. And they're just arguing and it just, that jump cut to thing. It's like, and it's just, he says you're a psycho. You just they're arguing about keeping the area nice. Taking care of things, paying attention to things is how we show love. Frank wants to fix things up. He wants to have friends, and Bill's like, we'll never have friends because there's no friends to be had. And then Frank is basically like, yes, there are, because I was talking to a nice lady on the radio. And he was like, what? I just love that juxtaposed with the previous scene. Everything just feels more lived in within a split second. Like there's this history. what this reminded me of as I was thinking about it is like almost like scenes from a marriage that they just did last year. Was it last year on HBO? On HBO Max? I think I feel like with
it was Oscar Isaac and
Jessica Chastain.
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Did you?
It was good. It was very good.
Yeah.
Some hard moments are hard to watch, but it was yeah, it just reminded me of that and just like these snapshots of a relationship that just it's just like it is really beautiful. I'm starting to like this episode even more. Now I'm gonna be like a fucking lemming, like everybody. It was so great. Oh.
It's all right to like it until
No, I did like it a lot. Yeah,
because it's all right.
I just liked it on its merit, on the merit of what I was.
Oh gosh, which is so different than how other people are liking it.
Okay, whatever.
Chris is different. Sorry,
I'm like it differently than you guys. I'm different. Oh my god.
So anyway, it's got some things. It's got some levels. Yeah, I think that's and that's love, right? That's like it's tried. It's difficult. It's frustrating. It's overcoming incompatibilities, or I don't know, just like living in those incompatibilities. The opposites attract thing that you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, I like that, living in those incompatibilities.
Which can be good and it can be bad.
Yeah. Well, yes. And I think that's what this show like hints on a lot, or just wants to show that. But I kind of disagree with that like, I don't know, that I disagree with that being a part of their Bible when describing at least how the Joel and Ellie will eventually feel about each other. Anyway, we cut to Joel and Tess eating dinner outside with them. Another great cut. And they're eating, and Tess is there, the late great Tess, eating with them, and Bill's eating with his gun on the table. Joel says he's the same way, and Frank's like, what, paranoid schizophrenic? And Bill says, I'm not schizophrenic. And so they're talking, and Tess is like, oh, this is it's nice to have a civilized meal in a beautiful place, whether we work together or not. Frank says we are working together. Frank wants to show Tess the house. Bill gets pissed. Joel tells Bill that he understands, and he says, if mine, meaning Tess, I'll ask you about that in a bit, brought strangers into our situation, I'd be upset too. And then out of all the people to find on the radio, he and Tess are actually decent people just trying to get by. And he says, we can help each other. Joel says, there's stuff that we have in the QZ that Bill doesn't have: books, medicine, machine parts, and get that gun out of my face. And he says, were you a prepper or something? Bill's like, a survivor. Bill doesn't need him or Tess to complicate their lives. And Joel just takes it all in, and he looks over at the fence and says, that your fence only has about a year left. The galvanized wires already started to corrode. I can get you 10 spools of high tensile aluminum, last you for the rest of your life. And then he corrects himself and says lives. I'll just read the rest of this stuff. And then Frank cut to the end, them about Joel and Tess about to leave. Frank gives Tess some supplies, and you start to hear him tell Tess about the radio codes, what they should do, and how to communicate with each other. Joe tells Bill that Fedra will never come here, and he's well protected from the strays and infected. But soon raiders will come, sooner or later. They'll beat his fence and his tripwires. They'll come at night, and they'll be quiet and armed. Bill says they'll be fine. Your thoughts on this this scene here?
Yeah, it was really a treat to see Joel and Tess in happier times, and to imagine what it would have been like if they would have maybe, I don't know, moved into this neighborhood.
I know, right?
With Bill and Frank. I think that we'll talk more about this later, but this kind of impulse that Frank has to welcoming people in, is really fundamental. Is really interesting. Kind of the fundamental thing about these apocalyptic scenarios. It's like, do we go safe and know that we can control this, which is Bill's tactic, right?
Right.
I don't want to let anybody in, or like Frank's thing of like, we can't hoard this. You have to
Right.
share it with people, and you also need other people to live a full life. So those kinds of tensions of how closed off, those kinds of parallels between Bill and Joel about how closed off they are and how strategic and strategically open Tess is interesting contrast to like, oh, I don't know, Frank's almost like misplaced enthusiasm or optimism about humankind. Yeah. Which I never thought of Tess as, but it'll be interesting to see. I hope we get a Tess episode. Yeah.
I think she may have 5 episodes that she's in. I think, but I could be wrong. I'm going to look at this real quick and see.
Because it strikes me that she's like more strategic.
3 episodes. Okay, so maybe that's it. That's maybe it. Just,
and then she's in this one. Yeah, so that's 3 already.
Unless they do, we may not. IMDb could be wrong. You never know.
Yeah,
they could be trying to trick us. All right. Yeah, it was nice. It was good to see them like that. How they build that relationship. I like how they set everything up, and now we know that that's. Well, I guess we'll talk about that later too. So fast forward to 3 years later, Bill and Frank are taking a jog. It's 2013 now. Bill and Frank are taking a jog around the neighborhood. Frank tells him to pick it up. He's lagging behind. He said, just one more loop around. I see Siri. No, Siri. I didn't say I wanted you. Bill's huffing and puffing, and Frank wants to show Bill something. He covers his eyes and opens to show him a garden of strawberries. They traded. Frank traded one of his guns, one of Bill's guns, for strawberry seeds, and they're eating them, and they're so good. Bill lets out a giggle.
Yeah,
it's so like childlike, and he like just so happy, and he says, "I'm sorry for getting older faster than Frank." He said, "I'm sorry for getting old," and they have like a moment, and it's like, then he says, I was never Bill tells Frank, "I was never afraid before you showed up." And that's because he didn't have anybody. So he didn't have anybody to worry about. They kiss and start making out, and Frank says, "Not on the strawberries." And we cut to night. The Raiders start coming. They cut down the fence. Stuff's blowing up. Frank calls out for Bill. Frank finds and loads a gun. And Bill's fending off the Raiders with his rifle. He's injured. He's got shot in the stomach. Frank carries him, and they're pretty much taking care of the Raiders with all his booby traps, and the gas from the fence is fucking up the Raiders and all that. So he's injured. He's shot in the stomach, looks like. Frank carries him inside and lays him on the dining room table. He goes to get supplies to tend to Bill's wounds. Bill says, "Leave the gas on. The fence will kill the rest of them." He says, "I made a list for you." He's got copies of all the keys. He says, "Call Joel. You can't be here alone." And he says, "I'm not alone. You're here." He says, "Call Joel. He'll take care of you." And Frank continues to work on him. What do you think? This scene, just another scene from a marriage, really. But what Joel says has come to reality, come to pass.
Yeah. I think it was there's a lot of flames and explosions. It's like a scene that's very suited to this genre, right? What's interesting is Bill completely drawn to, his own death immediately. Like, I've been shot, I'm going to die now, and I have to still take care of you, and that kind of theme that's going to come up over and over about the burden or responsibility of the protector. But in that scene, it's it's Frank that's, even though he gets Bill shot, but also why is Bill shooting, without any kind of cover? He's just like out
I don't
there
know.
shooting. And then he gets shot, which is kind of inevitable.
Bill's a savage though. Like in the game, he's an NPC. You don't control him, but he is a savage. Then the first time you see a machete, like he uses a machete, and that's the first person you see that uses one. And then you get and Bill's the first person in the game to give you a shot. He gives you a shotgun. You level up. Yeah.
I was reading, that like Bill is really the character that kind of like provides equipment and the kind of like journey of the game and really orients the player to getting artillery and kind of skills and things,
explosives, and like you get the shotgun, and you get the best weapon in the game to me are the bombs, the nail bombs, and that takes out a lot of people. It's the best in the game, best weapon.
So that part of Bill's character is really reduced in the show. That makes sense because there's more like the story beats and the storylines and how it's going to resonate with Joel. So his like a character emphasis is completely transformed, I think, from the game to the series.
Yeah, and it's because in the like we were talking about, like maybe before, the show is a lot more more hopeful than the video game. The game is more bleak or macabre. Is that the right way to say it?
I mean, it makes sense. It's tonally more. It's also probably more crude in how it introduces and characterizes this, and more kind of like shorthand of those kinds of like beats. And he's an NPC, right? So it's not going to have the same kind of drawn out cinematic that you would have in the beginning of the game, which is really significant for character building for Joel. But you don't need that for like someone like Bill. It's not the service that he's, that's not his role in the game. And, it's more hopeful, but then it's also just like maybe more fleshed out, these kinds of emotional themes.
Yeah.
Which you would expect from a show.
It's just like you get a great, like, because he is a great character in the game, but it's just like you only get a little bit of him, but so then we get 10 years later, they're old, and Frank's in a wheelchair. And he's got like, you don't know. Well, Mason and Druckmann Mason was basically saying he's got some kind of degenerative disease like MS or ALS. And that's kind of what I assumed too. Like he, as I was watching it. And he's been painting. He's painted a lot over their time together. Probably like 16 years, I think. Someone said 16 years they've been together. Looks like he painted a picture of a young Bill, and they cut to them eating. Bill asks him, like, did you take your pills? He pulls them out. He's like, one orangey, a big roundy. and they go to bed, kind of like just talking about their life or whatever. And Bill has to pick him up and put him in the bed, take him out of his wheelchair. So the next morning, Bill wakes up to Frank sitting in his wheelchair. He tells him it took him most of the night to get into the chair. Bill must be a hard sleeper because he didn't hear any of that. Bill gets upset because he says if you fall asleep in your chair, your feet turn blue. And he tries to get him back in the bed. And Frank says, no, because it's his last day. And we know what that means. He wants to be euthanized. Dr. Kevorkian.
Okay.
Bill says, cut to them downstairs. What if someone shows up who can help? And then Frank says, who's coming? The door-to-door MRI salesman? He's already made up his mind. There was no cure before the world fell apart, and there's no cure now. And he says he's not going to give him. Stop it, Siri. Stop it.
He wants to be included. They want to be included.
No, Siri. I don't know why.
Oh gosh.
Oh
my God.
Way too much. Bill says, no, I don't need you. Bill says he's not going to give him what is it? So I didn't give him an every day was a wonderful gift from God speech. He says he's had a lot of bad days and he has had some bad days with Bill. He says, but most of the days have been good. And he just wants one more good day. He said, you can start by making me some toast, take me to the boutique where we'll pick out outfits. You'll wear what I asked you to wear, and then we'll get married. Then we'll eat, and you'll crush up these pills and put in the wine, and you take me upstairs, and then you'll fall asleep. He said, I'll fall asleep in your arms. And Bill says, I can't do that. And Frank says, do you love me? Yes. Bill says, yes. He says, then love me the way I want you to. And then Bill starts crying. And then we get this montage of Bill pushing him around the neighborhood in his wheelchair. They're dressing up, putting rings on each other. They kiss, they eat dinner. Cut to Bill bringing out another bottle of wine and glasses. Bill puts the crushed pills in Frank's glass and he stirs it up. And he asks, will it be enough? Bill says, yeah. Frank guzzles it down. Bill guzzles his down. Frank asks if Bill already had pills in the bottle. Bill says, yes, enough to kill a horse. So that means both of them are going to die. It's not. And then he says, it's not the tragic suicide at the end of the play. This is what Bill says. It's not the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old and I'm satisfied. And Frank, he says, you were my purpose. Frank doesn't support this. He said, I should be furious, but from a protective point of view, it's romantic. He tells Bill to take him to bed. He does. And then there's a blackout. And that's, I guess, the end of Act 2, would you say? Or kind of
yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty long Act 2. It's their Act 3.
Act 2. Probably Act 3, but then I guess you get the denouement.
Yeah, there's bookends. Yeah, there's bookends with
there you go. That's why you're on the show, Veronica. That's why you're one of the greats.
Come on.
I'm like, what is that?
Well, I don't know, man. I'm just guessing. No,
you know what you're talking about.
Murray Bartlett. It's so good. His performance is really good in the scene. And, I did. You said you didn't cry. Okay. I've been thinking about this. I did tear up a little bit when they go, they're all dressed up from the clothes that they had from the boutique, and they're sitting on the piano bench and they're exchanging rings and presumably exchanging vows, right? Yeah. And I don't really care about marriage. I don't really like marriage. I'm divorced, whatever. That still got me. Just the look, the way that they exchange looks, the intensity of Murray Bartlett as Frank looking into, it's so nice. Scene.
It was great. Like I'm not trying to say I didn't cry because I'm tough. I just didn't cry.
It didn't hit.
Yeah. If something makes me cry, I'll be the first one to tell it on the podcast.
I know it's a badge thing. I mean, it's a badge of honor thing with you. I think it means like this was a good show. This was a good movie. But then sometimes it's just like I'm in a certain,
like I would say
moment in a certain place.
Coda wrecked me.
And I didn't cry at Coda.
Yeah.
So, I don't, it's like the kind of, go ahead.
I always say, and every time we talk, you and I talk about this, any kind of art, any kind of TV show, film, we all bring our baggage to the art we consume. And when I saw that, when I saw Coda, I was at my parents' house. My dad had been dead for maybe a month or two or something like that. And I was sitting in his recliner watching that movie. And it was a movie about following your dreams in the arts. And that fucking got me. So that was a, what do you call that? A cocktail of emotions. So that was that movie. But there's if it gets you, it gets you. I
think what it is, it's the mortality. It's knowing you're going to die.
Yeah.
I think a lot about death. I don't know.
I do too.
You do. I mean, obviously, right now in your life, you have in the season.
Oh, even before my dad died.
Yeah.
Even before he died. Yeah. It's a thing we all got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming for all of us. And the fact that, like they were going to be able to get out of this world, exit in a way that the terms that they chose, and that Frank's character is going to be able to exit in the terms that he chose. I don't know. It was just like, and the good day thing, like the admitting to the line is, I've had more good days with you than anyone else.
Right.
And, like trying to frame, like every day isn't bad. There are some good days, and it's just like you want the good days to outweigh the bad days.
Right.
And so I don't know. It's just something that kind of about them dying together, about them choosing to die together, and them not having to be made into clickers is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. See, the thing, I guess maybe we'll talk about it at the end. Okay. So so that's it for them. Then we get to they're dead. Then we get to the present day. We see our main characters, Joel and Ellie. They're walking through they get to Billstown. They get to the gate. Joel knows the code. They eventually get to the house, Bill and Frank's, and they call out. Joel calls out to them, no answer. And they're in the foyer, and Joel tells Ellie, if you hear anything or see anything, yell. Joel walks around, knocks on the bedroom door, no answer. Tries to open the door, nothing. And it's because it's locked. Ellie wanders around. She finds a letter with a key on top of it, and it says it's addressed to whomever, but probably Joel. And Joel comes back in the room, and this is August 29th, 2023. Ellie says, you want me to read the letter? And no, Ellie says, do you want to read it? And Joel says, you read it. She starts reading it. Wait, no. Then she says,
you wanna
go ahead. And then Joel says, so they're dead. And Ellie says, was that right? Does she ask? Yeah.
It's fine. It's like, yeah. That's the information that is conveyed in this conversation.
That they're dead. So August 29th, 2023. This is Ellie. Ellie reads the letter. I'm going to read the letter. I transcribed it. If you find this, please do not come in the bedroom. We left the window open so the house wouldn't smell. It will probably be a sight. I'm guessing you found this, Joel, because anyone else would have been electrocuted or blown up by one of my traps. I love the way that Bella read that. It was good. It was great.
It was really good.
Take anything you need. The bunker code is the same as the gate code, but in reverse. Anyway, I never liked you, but still, it's like we're friends, almost, and I respect you. So I'm going to tell you something because you're probably the only person who'd understand. I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died. But I was wrong because there's one person worth saving. That's what I did. I saved him. Then I protected him. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do. And God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. Message, I leave you all my weapons and my equipment. Use them to keep. And Ellie stops reading. And Joel takes the letter from Ellie. We see that the letter says basically to use the guns and stuff to keep Tess safe. And then something about pairing wine with their food. He's expecting them to move in, I guess. And he tells Ellie to stay inside. So he steps outside to have a moment for himself. This is a great thing about Pedro Pascal. And it's just a great acting moment where it's like, he wants to break down. He's on the verge of doing it. You could look at his face and then he just doesn't. Why? Because he's a cowboy. And you're not going to get that. You're not going to get those emotions from him. But you can see that, that he's tough, but you could see that armor crack slightly. And it's growing into this being a really masterful fucking performance from him. And I just, I don't know. Part of me is like, I enjoy doing this with you and I enjoy recapping the show, but it's almost like I don't I don't think I'll really enjoy the show until this is all over. In some ways, I don't know what that
Just
is.
because of anxious about how it's going to go down, or
Not necessarily the anxiety, but just like there is some anxiety. Like I gotta make sure I get my notes. I gotta do this, and then
okay.
do rewatch the show and enjoy it. But I don't know. Maybe I rewatched Mayor of Easttown. That was the other show that I did, last
Mhm.
a year or two ago, and that was kind of the same way. But there's just like I think it's just my own bullshit, and it's not even anything
No,
that's bad. It's just like I think it's more of me being a nerd than anything else.
I think
So
there's a couple of things going on. There's like you're
well,
recapping it, which is
yeah,
already like a thing. Like watching a piece of media in this way is kind of strange.
yeah,
And then the other part of it is the gamer part, the person who's invested in
hmm
the story. And I think a lot of people who were very invested in the game are going to be like, how's the storytelling? How is this gonna do it? How is it going to interpret it? Um, and so that makes sense that it would also be sort of like you have to have the whole of it in order to be able to judge, whether you enjoyed it or how you enjoy it or what the beats are.
And here's the other thing. One is it's a job that I've given myself.
Yeah,
It's just
which is
it's another job that I've given myself, and I have to be on point to talk with the likes of you, Veronica, as I tip
all
my
right, Chris. Yeah,
metaphorical
yeah.
hat. But no, I really it's just like because I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff, and I every time I've seen him in something, I've liked him, but I'm just like, wow, he really because even Troy Baker, who voiced and mocap Joel in the video game, was like, wow, there's like so much stuff that he's showing me things that I've never seen, and he was not being like he was not placating Pedro. He was just
Yeah,
like that moment when Tess is infected, he wants to touch her, but he's scared. He like draws back
yeah,
a little bit. Like those little tiny moments that just like it's the nuance.
yeah.
There's this HBO miniseries. This is going on a tangent. We got to get out of here. Frank Langella played this character in this show called Unscripted. And it was a show about young actors in LA taking this acting class. And it was, I think Steven Soderbergh produced it. Brian Greenberg was in it. He was a young actor at the time. I liked it. Frank Langella. It's almost like how what's my man in Barry, Fonz,
Henry Winkler's
Henry
character.
Winkler. It's almost like It's almost like they're kind of on parallel lines. But there was this thing like where like it's almost like acting is like in between what you do in between like action and cut. And it's not always those moments where you're yelling. And Frank Langella was like, I hope maybe I can find it and show it to you after we're done. But he was saying like, he said, it's like everything in between. It's like anybody can do this. And anybody can do this. Like anybody can be over dramatic. You can yell, be angry, you can cry. But then like, what are you doing in between? It's the small parts that really make the whole in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. What? And I was going to say, I think the writing is there's a lot of really interesting things happening with the adaptation.
mhm.
So I'll just talk about that moment where Joel reads the letter, and it sounds like that's a point. Like, okay, so he's written the letter. In the game, it's Frank who's written the letter to Bill, and it's Bill who receives that letter and kind of like, in the same kind of way that Ellie lies and says that it's not her fault at all.
Yeah.
In the game, Bill says, well, fuck you, Frank, right? Or like, whatever. I don't even care about that.
Yes.
And tries to like, suppress a kind of like sadness about this
Right.
person being gone. And the hurt of the relationship ending. So that kind of emotional beat maybe isn't I don't know how it came off in the game, but that's given to Joel's character, and then Pedro Pascal can kind of like interpret it in this way, and it's like giving us insight, and it's sort of parallel also to Ellie, who doesn't want to apologize for Tess's death because it's not her fault, and it's not her fault, but you know, she might think it is.
Well, you can tell she feels
bad.
bad. Yeah, it's like you can tell has some guilt because she doesn't finish the letter. Like she could have easily just finished it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like that moment because it's like he's failed because he hasn't kept Tess alive. So you already
and that thing, yeah.
That's
the story. That's the line. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
That's the line that they kept on saying in the podcast too. Like Craig, Mason.
I just say Mason,
and Druckmann. Like he's failed or something. And I don't remember what this was from. But I forget which show it is, but it's like no one can protect anyone. You know, like in this world, no one can protect anyone. And I think in a way, like the larger lesson that we're going to get to in The Last of Us is like at what cost, right? To keep someone safe at what cost. So we can come back to that question maybe after we finish the episode, but it's been something that I've been thinking about in relation to Frank and Bill, and also this thing about like he didn't protect Tess. I mean, Tess made a choice, you know, eventually she's like bought into the idea of Ellie as hope for a future cure, future vaccine. So I don't, you know, like this thing about, I don't know, maybe he thinks he failed in protecting, but I don't think that as a viewer or as an interpreter.
Oh, sure. But but if the character thinks it, then that's what's real. You know what I mean? Like that's what's, is the right word
and
to say
for them.
prescient? For them, yeah. Those are the given circumstances for that character where it's just like, oh fuck. Now this is why he goes back in and he says, it's kind of something like that a parent would do. Like I don't know, like my dad and my mom, you'd be mad about something. And you might be right as a kid or something. I don't know. It's like one of the, you ever had those moments where like your parents compromise with you? It could be an argument. It could be like a blowout or something. And then you take some time away and your mom or dad comes back and says, all right, this is what we're going to do. You're going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to do this thing for you. But you got to do this for me. You got to get your grades up, whatever it is. You know what I mean? That's immediately what I thought. Because he comes back in, and not yet. He okay. So he goes, okay.
Yeah, I think that sets it up. Yeah.
Not yet, but he goes. He goes and looks at the garage. He goes into the garage. It's Bill's truck is there. He uncovers it. It's that Chevy S10, and he pops the hood. There's no battery, but he looks in the fridge. There's all the components you need to make one. Because if you keep a battery in a truck for a long time, it'll die. So then he goes back inside, and he says, "Show me your arm." He tells Ellie, and he said, "Okay, I made a battery. It takes a couple hours to charge." He says, I got a brother out in Wyoming who's in some kind of trouble. I'm going to go see him. He used to be a firefly. And I guess maybe he might know he may know where some of them are so they can get you to that lab. And then Ellie says, listen, about Tess. Joel cuts her off. And this is where it is. He's like, if I'm taking you with me, there's some rules you got to follow. Rule number 1, you don't bring up Tess ever. We can just keep our history to ourselves. Rule number 2, you don't tell anyone about your condition. They see that bite mark, they won't think it through, they'll just shoot you. Rule number 3, you do what I say when I say it. We're clear. And Ellie says, yes, repeat it. What you say goes. Okay. That's straight from the video game.
Right.
And that it's in a different spot, but it's in the video game. We'll go a little further. Maybe we we can finish it, and then we'll talk about it. Then they say, so what now? We grab what we can. And so they go downstairs. We hear Chains of Love by Erasure, which is, what year is that?
88.
88. So trouble, but it's we find we'll talk about it. So that's playing. They go down into his basement bunker. There's guns all over the wall, and Ellie's like, "Holy shit, this guy was a genius." And she says, "Why'd he leave the music on?" And then Joel says, "If he didn't reset the countdown every few weeks, this countdown would play over the radio. So it'd just be all 80s because they would be in trouble." And Ellie sees the guns on the wall, and she says, "Dude," and Joel says, "No." They gather some supplies. Ellie finds out that they have hot water. She's like, "I'm going to take a shower." And you can see when in the montage, she picks out a shirt and she wears for the most part for most of the time in the video game. They kind of had some of that reversed. Like the stuff that she was wearing at the beginning of the show is something that like in this episode is what she wears later on in the video game. Anyway. So she showers. She's wearing that shirt. She's hanging around and looking at around the house. She finds she messes up the what do you call that grandfather clock. She breaks it, which means time has stopped. That's another message. Joel. Oh, and then she finds looks in a cabinet, looks in a drawer rather, finds Frank's pistol and stuffs it in her backpack right before Joel can come into the room, and she sees Joel and says, "Well, don't you look pretty?" And Joel says, "Shut up." Joel's wearing a shirt, one of Frank's shirts, and Joel's wearing that shirt in most of the video game. That, you know, something like that shirt he has on, flannel. He says, "Shut up," and throws her some deodorant. And they get in the truck. Ellie's excited because she says the truck's like a spaceship. And Joel says, "No, it's like a piece of shit Chevy S10 that'll get us there, I think." Another moment to where they're warming up. He puts a seatbelt on Ellie, which shows he cares. And and Ellie pulls out a tape. Joel says, "Leave it." She puts it in anyway. And he's like, "Come on, just say." And then she's about to take it out. And Joel says, No, wait, that's Linda Ronstadt. He says, "You know who Linda Ronstadt is?" And she says, "No." And then they drive off. And as they're driving off, the camera pans back into Bill and Frank's room, which is as the Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt plays. But the video game, the menu screen shows a window in the in the video game. That's and you see that theme in the other game too. You see that thing like that in the other game.
So I've been thinking about this open window thing and the window and all that, because I know that they mentioned in the official podcast as something that they wanted to potentially open and end or have in every episode. And I was thinking about the open window and how Frank opens to the world, right? Like the fact that their story is even being shared is because Frank reached out to Tess and they were communicating. So it's like openness to the world, right? And a closed window is like closed off in the kinds of ways that Bill and Joel was trying to be for a while.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was thinking about that window, just like, why is it so significant for them? And it's as a metaphor. And so that's what I kind of arrived at, potentially deeper for you.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely something there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely symbolism. I mean, that's like that. Was that room upstairs or downstairs? Because I thought the room was.
Oh, but it did appear to be up in the last shot, but I think where they were situated for the end was
downstairs, right? Because when you get older, that's okay. That makes sense. I was just making sure. But that last shot was from upstairs, right?
It looks like it, but maybe it's a high window.
Yeah.
But yeah.
architecture pod with Veronica
continuity
and Chris.
thing there. Yeah.
But that's where their relationship started, though, was consummated, I guess, in the upstairs
right.
room. Yeah. So
yeah.
That's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And you know, a nerd thing for me, Linda Ronstadt, one of her records, Blue Bayou, was in Man on Fire, which is another film, Denzel Washington, young Dakota Fanning, another thing about a guy protecting a troubled man, protecting a little girl, risking it all for a little girl.
Yeah. Linda Ronstadt, she's got roots in Mexico. Did you know her dad was Mexican? I mean, it's like white Mexicans, German father, like, German.
Okay.
But Mexican for generations. So, I mean, I looked that up, and I'd always known that she was Mexican. I didn't know it's like the German potential, you know.
Interesting.
But yeah, she's I think performed in, like, I'm looking at a Google thing of her right now, and she's in a mariachi kind of like wardrobe or outfit. So,
because that movie Man on Fire took place in Mexico, right?
See, I looked at in Mexico City is how the description of the film begins. So, Dakota Fanning plays a character called Lupita Ramos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? You never seen it? Oh wow. What's my man?
It's 2004. Christopher Walken's in it too.
Yeah, but what's her daddy was in the movie was Mark Anthony.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was married to Rhoda Mitchell, so Rhoda Mitchell was white.
I see.
Mark Anthony, you know. So that's how they did it. But yeah,
it's interesting.
It makes me want to watch it. I got it on DVD. He was cold-blooded. So, go ahead.
Oh, I don't have anything. So I wanted to say, you know, we skipped over you sure look pretty. Pedro Pascal did look pretty clean. He did look quite nice.
He said,
I mean, you mentioned it, but we didn't pause and talk about how good he looked.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't talk about how hot he was.
We just need to talk about that for a little while, I think. Just want, you know, wonders what a shower will do, you know?
He looked great. Like she said, she was like, basically, you need to take a shower, dude.
Is it weird that before Frank and Bill consummate their relationship, there's also the shower theme?
I didn't think about it that way, but I know I understand that. But it's just like, oh, we'll get cleaned up. You know what I mean? Like, because that's something
because they can.
You know, it's like think, y'all, they probably stink. And I love how Ellie has some tampons. She found her some tampons, and Joel washed his ass. You know what I mean? They both washed themselves. You know, it's good that they put that in. I was like, this isn't in the game. This is fucking dirty, bro. You know?
So do they mention like menstruation at all in the game?
They did not. No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Way too many clickers and stalkers and runners to be worried about that. Yeah, to realize for her to go through puberty.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I thought that was there's starting to be some sweetness between them, and yeah. Like you're saying, the kind of like will you abide by my rules and all these things. But the kind of parental love is being set up, and this kind of other love. I think that this is Bill and Frank. I almost said Bill and Ted. Bill and Frank's relationship. Travel back in history. No, their relationship is about the romantic love, but then also how romantic love transforms into caretaking as well. You know, you assume that Frank's gonna have to take care of Bill because he seems to be in better shape, but then it's reversed. Tables are changed. Anyway, what is the expression? Tables are turned.
Tables have turned.
And you know, that I think that's also what got me is like thinking about death and who's going to take care of me when I get old and I'm going to die and all that. And if I don't have kids, who's it going to be? And those kinds of questions. And, that kind of transformation of like hot romantic young love to like caretaking for one another. It's just really sweet. And the ways that, the little things that are interlaced throughout, where like, Frank says something about the little things. You have to pay attention to the small things. That leads to love, or that is love. And when he's painting at one moment, Bill waters the flowers. It's like he cares about the landscaping too now, influenced by Frank. That moment when Ellie like moves the key over to give to Joel, there's like dust on the table, which is really like obvious that they're like the spirit of the place is gone, because Frank, when he first arrived, drags a finger across the mantle place and notices that it's dusty, and that he can improve Bill's life in this way with like his care for the small things and for home, tend to the home.
Yeah. I thought it was a very good episode. I just think that there's more to come. And just like John Mayer's second album, heavier things are coming. Like the tampons mentioned too, right? Heavier things, heavier blood flows. Heavier flow. Wow, Veronica. Wow. Wow. I don't know this John Mayer reference. Heavier things are coming. No, that's just the name of his second album, Heavier. Okay. It's just the name. Okay. Yeah. No, I think so. And it's prompting. It's priming us for those heavier things too, though, right? Yeah, because that letter, let me read it again. Not the whole letter, but just the we have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. I think this is these main tensions, right? Like I think thinking about the individual, and I think that Bill wants to protect Frank, wants to protect his own, right? And it's his loved one, his family, his family. And this is the fundamental kinds of questions that are going to come up for Joel, is like, and that Tass and Frank were thinking about, like, how can we share this beyond just ours, just our family, And so this is like the fundamental kinds of questions, like, is it the community? Is it the world? Is it just your own? And, in lieu of like having a kind of normative nuclear family, as we are able to have potentially pre-apocalypse, or the kind of promise of that, how do you make family and how do you make someone your own? And is it still any action is worth taking to protect them? Yeah. Weren't you going to say something else too? About I don't know, just about this episode, or like a. No, I think it was that stuff, that key tension that's coming up between individual, because like, I don't know, I was watching this with my partner, and it was like, would it have been nice if Joel and Tess stayed with them? And wouldn't you, I would want to have like a home like this, right? And that's how I want to go out, right? Like dying with my loved one or whatever, and choosing that and not having to get killed by raiders or whatever it might be. I would probably choose to go out this way, right? I think about these things when you watch these apocalypse TV shows. But isn't that kind of lonely? And isn't that kind of limited? Like, you don't have a world out there and you're not sharing it with the resources or people who are more needy, is what he brought up. Like, who's more needy out there? Aren't you, like, isn't that kind of selfish? Right. Yeah. You made me think about, like, I didn't mention how the outside looked by the time they got really old. The cars were stacked up by the fence to keep people out, and it just got even more probably got a little more depressing, and maybe God, when did Joel and Tess start coming? Was it like after 2007 probably?
Yeah, about then.
Yeah.
2010-ish. 2010.
Yeah, probably 2010.
Yeah.
Like years later. So they've been doing that for years.
2013. Yeah.
So 16 years they were together. And then yes. Yeah, so they would have been doing that for quite some time. Like that friendship.
Yeah.
So they were in the show, they've known each other for a long time. So it probably did sting Joel a little bit, because I just like the fact that he wasn't just that he was affected by it, but he had to still soak it all in. Like Bill Burr has that bit about like how men die before women. Like in a relationship, the man dies first, and they have to, because you have to suck everything in, and then you have to hold it in until it makes you sick, and then you just eventually die. Basically.
Wait. The men die. Wait, who dies first?
The man.
Oh, okay.
The man dies first.
Okay. So. Yeah, okay, whatever.
You have to see that. I have to show you the bit, but it's not. It's not like. It's not a. Well, that was an angry Bill Burr back then. Not necessarily angry, but like that. That's a thing. It's not like it always happens, but that's kind of a.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, and
if you will,
and there is statistics thing. It's just that, like, well, in this storyline, I don't know about man and woman, but Frank goes first, and then it's this thing. I think it's also this thing of like one person goes first, and then what's the life after that person, right? It's so weird, and someone like Joel has to carry on after Tess, because there's like this new hope, which is Ellie, right? And that was Tess's hope, was this new hope.
Right. Because it's definitely propelling us to the end quicker than the game, because in the game, we talked about this before we went on. In the game, it's you get to Lincoln, you get to Bill's town, you got to avoid all these traps and whatnot, you clickers and everything. Then you get to this like auto shop or warehouse, and you get caught, and Joel gets caught in one of Bill's traps, and he's hanging upside down. He's got to pull his gun out and try to shoot the infected that are coming in, trying to protect Ellie. And then Bill is the one who saves you, cuts you down, takes you to his safe house. So it's like Bill is already like, just like, him to be this lonely doomsday prepper guy, and there's like nothing else that he's really thinking about. And then Bill and in the game, him and Frank were estranged. You don't even meet Frank, because it's just a character that they gave more of a story. They gave a whole story. They gave him literally put life in this dude that you see in the video game, where like you're in this house looking for this battery. You go all over town, all over Lincoln, trying to find this battery. You go in the schoolhouse, you meet a bloater, which not having seen this episode, I thought we were going to find the bloater first before we had this story. And it was your first real like boss fight in the game, and that was taken away. You're in this abandoned high school, and it's like, okay. And then to get this is what we were going to talk about then. So you find a battery for the car, for the truck, and you find it at wherever you find it in a house where Frank left Bill. Yeah. And so in the game, Frank got bitten by the infected. He was going to try to get away, but then he got infected, and then he hung himself. And you kind of bump into him, and like, who's that? And then it's like, oh, he was my partner. And that's where Bill finds out. And of course he's crestfallen and he's sad about it, but he like shoves it off. And as Joel, you find the letter that what we read for that happened in the TV show. That's a little bit of an amalgam of how Frank felt about Bill. But it's almost like it's like the letter, but it's almost nothing. It's nothing like it, you know.
Yeah.
And then you take the truck and you have to push it to start it. Ellie's driving. Ellie, you know, is working the clutch, and you push it down a hill. You got to fight off these infected, and you both jump in. And once you get to a safe space, Bill's basically like Joel says, "Hey, man, I'm sorry about your friend," and Bill cuts him off. And he's like, "Hey, look, man, are we square?" And Joel's like, "Yeah." So take the truck and basically get out of my town. Like, and Bill just goes off. And that's it. So they made a whole, like you said, bottle episode really about those two characters. It's a beautiful thing that they did.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I know it's going to throw a lot of the cis het male gamers. It's a lot of them that don't like it. My pushback from this, like I said, I think there's more excellent TV coming. They better do right by these black characters in this that were in this game that they're putting in this thing. That's my only thing. You do right by Henry and Sam and Riley, and I'm good. I think this show is great. I think it's gonna win awards and whatnot. I hope I'm at a place where I can lobby to have a part in season 2. But I'm saying they better do right by these black characters. That's it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. And I think they will. I hope.
It's going to be interesting. I think that's what we can say. I think that I think they are trying to do more complex things with the gay characters in this episode. You know, there is a death by suicide, but it's both of them, and it's not a kind of like, it is very motivated, makes sense in the world of the show narrative. I hope, like that you're saying that they can give the same kind of attention to humanity, to the humanity of the characters, to the black characters, and to the kinds of issues around race. We'll see. You know, And
what do you think about this? Because like I've just in TV, like I guess you'd have to ask someone who is queer, but it just seems like within the last 5 years, when you see a gay character on a TV show, like a soap or a drama, it's like, do they always have to be fucking punished? Like, is there?
I mean, I don't think it's the last 5 years. It's since the representation of, gay characters in plays, in anything. It's forever.
I'm even talking about like just like the modern era, like post, like I said, what are we 20 plus years past? Will and Grace, you know.
Well, people would say Will and Grace was kind of trafficking and stereotypes, and those were played by actors who are not gay too, right? I mean, that's the other thing that one might say about this episode. And thinking about Nick
Offerman's not gay, but and
I think he does do interesting things when this. I mean, there's also the thing of like casting comedians in more dramatic roles, like someone who's known more for his comedic roles in Parks and Rec. And what is it? What does it mean to have him be this character?
Well, do you remember what they said about that? Like those are the actors that have the humanity, that they're in touch with their humanity. Like I've said this 100,000 times on this show, on this podcast, like where like some of the best, like one of the best pieces of acting advice I ever got was listening to one of the Farrelly brothers talk about Ben Stiller and There's Something About Mary, where at the director's commentary where Ben Stiller's character is like sad because he thinks Mary's rejected him and he's crying. And then one of the directors said, one of the things I like about Ben Stiller is like the way that he commits to the role, and he's really crying, he's sad. And it's funny when he's crying, the way he's doing it, but that character doesn't know he's in a comedy. You know what I'm saying? Like he's having this visceral reaction because his heart's broken. So yeah, it's coming across as funny, but that character is in pain until he realizes that, you know, she wants him, you know, whatever. But it's just like, that's part of it. That's why there's some, not all comedians are really good actors. Like they can tap into the humanity.
Yeah. They might also, I mean, there's also been a rep of them being really bad actors too, though, right? So there's like
there's some too,
both parts of it.
I'm talking about somebody like that is not that like Robin Williams. Now, Oscar winner. Richard Pryor didn't do a lot of great movies, but there's some where he was really good, and you know, just he turned in some great performances in some dramatic work. A lot of Eddie Murphy has done it. You know, there's a list. The list goes. There's a list of it. I even think controversial statement. I think Tiffany Haddish has an Oscar in her somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's also interesting, the pairing of these two, because Murray Bartlett and I mean, I know him from White Lotus. I know he's done other things too, but his timing, he's very funny. You know, like there's just something very, I don't know, man. Offerman does a good job in this, and I think that the kind of awkwardness of this character, of this version of Bill, like kind of the giggling and the kind of like
closed off physicality
of his younger self, you know, and the kind of growth that he presents is really interesting. But Murray Bartlett, man, he's just like the kind of like the depths of emotion that he's able to convey in this character. Yeah. It's beyond, and it kind of elevates it to something else, I think. My own read. I mean, I think that a lot of people are reading it that way, right? That his performance was just like very, very good. The kind of, and there is this way that he is just the humor that he's able to use. So it's the two of them together. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting also to see how someone like a character like Riley, because, you know, we also don't want to get into this thing of like all the gay characters are white and all the like, you know,
or it's just like they're within this, everybody's fucking doomed in the world of this thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like there's like I don't know, just characters on a teen soap. It's like this character's gay, and that character's life is the fucking worst. And it's almost like, is it because they're gay? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, I noticed that. Like, I try to, not to say I'm fucking super woke or anything, but like, can't that person just be regular? You know what I mean?
I mean, don't you think that they have like a charmed life, though? I think that Frank's life is kind of the best. I mean, I was so worried that something bad was going to happen. And overall, it's like a pretty, I mean, everything we see of his life, he says that there were more good days than bad days, but pretty fucking good for like apocalypse, you know?
I was just saying as a whole, not necessarily characters, but just like talking about these themes where it's just like, you know, it's easy for me. You know, we talked about the racial lens where it's just like, why the black guy got to be, why the Mexican guy, why the brown dude, why the Mexican girl had to be, why da. But I see the same in other groups that are othered. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can't help but not. It's just like, really? Why does the?
Yeah. And I think that that gets back to the kind of like problem with the discursive response, or the response that's been happening in reviews and things of like the self-congratulatory thing of these aren't those doomed characters, and it is a sweet bottle episode of a love story in an apocalyptic TV show.
Because I remember just going back to Dahmer when I said that I tweeted this, Veronica, when I was talking about. You're like,
well, if you tweeted it, please.
That Jeffrey Dahmer episode, I said that's some of the best TV I've ever seen. And then somebody says, well, some fucking idiot on Twitter was like, well, you know, real people died. And I was like,
yeah.
But, you know, like there was some pushed back by maybe one person, but the people who knew what the fuck I was talking about knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's like, oh, because these characters were gay, it was a thing that we've never seen before. This is a guy like I went to see Moonlight. I went to an advanced screening of Moonlight. I saw.
What did you want? An award for that? Did you want
Yes.
Did
God
you want a
damn
prize?
it. I do.
Badge?
I do.
Ally.
Give me my hashtag ally. No, but I didn't go to see it because it was gay themed.
Right.
I wanted to see it because it was Barry Jenkins, and I like Barry Jenkins, who unfollowed me on Twitter, probably because I tweeted about Pretty Little Liars too much. But whatever.
Well, you had Barry Jenkins following you, which is pretty good. That's something. Me. Yeah, he used to. Well, you could just say, yeah, Barry Jenkins followed me. That's it. Not even used to. Just followed me.
Yeah.
It's like that tense works. But no, I don't know. I think that, what is it? I think that there's these arguments about like the best. And this more fundamental question about like why the best? You know, like what's the point of that? In all of television, the best, and like why this ranking of it? And does it make you better if you rank something that is not that you're an ally for?
That's what we do in America.
What's the point? You know, like it's just like to make it polarized and to fight a little bit.
When I saw it, nobody gives a shit what I say. Like, I mean, I love doing this podcast. There's not millions of people listening to it. I love doing it because for its intrinsic value. Would I like more people to listen? Would I like to generate more money that I could pay you and do more cool shit? Of course I would. But having this discourse is what I like to do. But at the same time, if I felt, that's what I felt when I saw it. I was like, this is some great fucking TV. I rewatched The Wire. I was maybe the first episode. I was like, oh my God, this really is amazing. You know what I mean? Like, I thought it was good when I was watching it, but then going back to things that I know somebody at 20, 21 years old watching it, and somebody being like 40, 42 at the time, rewatching it, just being like, wow, that is really fucking good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rewatching The Sopranos, having more of an understanding of great television. Like it is like us talking about Better Call Saul and all that stuff. Like, it's just like, wow, that was really good. And that piece of TV, I don't know. Am I Dan Le Batarding it a little bit? Sometimes I do that. And I do that.
What's that mean?
Like, he'll say, like, we've never seen anything like this before. Aaron Rodgers, we've never seen like Nas being great at his age, putting out some of his best work. Like I said that a couple months ago. Like, we've never seen anything like this before. But I think we've seen this is prestige TV. It's on HBO. I think it's living up to it's living up to a lot of people's expectations. It's
prestige, but it's also like the genre bit too, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting that's why the Dahmer thing comes up, because it's true. It's like a crime show. It's like a serial killer show, right? And to have that kind of episode in that series is a contrast, means something. In making that disruption within that genre. The same kind of thing is happening here. I think that Walking Dead really attempts a lot of this too, what's happening here with Last of Us. And I think that there have been, lesser attempts that have been made by that show to do an episode like what we have in Long Time episode of Last of Us. But some of these themes have been well worn by them. But, they would never say, any episode of Walking Dead is the best television in history, right? Because it's been on too long. It's too much in this genre. And so, I think that's what's interesting. But maybe that has to come before Last of Us for people to try to say these kinds of things about this episode.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, when I started to watch Luther, and Luther opened me up to other, like those British cop shows, detective shows, and like what I would like to do, given the opportunity. But in those shows, like those mini series, they do like 6 or 7 episodes. Sometimes they might do 4. And a character that you've like been emotionally invested in just dies just like that. That was like, to me, like the first time that I was like, whoa, these people can go at any time. And that happens in The Last of Us, in the video game, and that happens on the series, where it's like, oh, these people can be taken away from me in a heartbeat. So it's like, and it could happen to anybody. So it's just kind of like, well, that's kind of being introduced into like the mainstream media now in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that's something that's exciting as a fan to me. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that kind of like that spirit of thing. And I was remembering that the character dialogue that I was thinking of, no one can protect anyone, comes from Game of Thrones, comes from Sansa Stark. So anyway, there's just something here about thinking about genre. Right. Thinking about genre within, like, it's a video game adaptation, thinking about it within, it's like science fiction, disaster, apocalypse story. So there's just all these kinds of like intersections. It's like Chernobyl, because just because of Craig Mazin.
I'll just say Mazin.
Oh my God, why do I keep doing this? Anyway, Mazin, and the kind of like the ways that there's attention to the disaster, right?
Yeah.
Not only like there is curiosity about how this happens, and with the cold opens, with all these other things that is reminiscent of Chernobyl. So there's just like all these kinds of intersections that are coming together that are making it really interesting.
Yeah.
But there were no like Sopranos episodes about, I was thinking about like specifically the representation of gay characters having a storyline that highlights love, or queer characters, Sopranos, no. Maybe The Wire a little bit. The Wire does.
The Wire does. Sopranos did. They had a gay character.
That's like a love story. That's like not like that's not, this is the thing, is when you were saying about Sopranos, Better Call Saul, it's like also always these kinds of like, Sopranos is fuzzy, but Italian American. These are all like white male protagonists.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I think that my orientation about like that, it's something we'll continue to think about, this prestige TV and genre TV, and how those things kind of, the conversations happening. And then that intersects with like the social media thing of like always having to say, this is the greatest ever, this is the best ever, you've never seen anything like this, just that you can get more listeners, more viewers, more whatever, more readers.
I don't really tweet that much anymore. I don't really,
because Barry Jenkins stopped following you. It's like, what's the point?
I tweeted a little bit last night because we got 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl next month, but and I'm excited about that. But I just kind of lost my desire to be good at it.
Yeah.
But I think that was like a few months ago where like I was like, wow, I felt that. Like I felt that was a great episode. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't be mad at anybody who disagreed, but that's how I felt. I've watched a lot of TV, and I've in my almost 43 years of life next month. So it's been some really good stuff, because you have, I don't know, but this is great. I just think.
What do you think, Chris?
I think that there's more coming. I think that they got more.
I think there is. Yeah.
Six more of these.
Let's do it. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Okay.
Any other thoughts on this before we wrap it up?
No. Let's see what happens next week. I think, I'm also, when do you think Henry and Sam and that character that storyline's going to happen?
I think it's going to be next week.
Oh, okay, great.
Probably towards the end of next week, or episode 4 or 5.
Okay, this is good. Then that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Delving into.
because in the game they're supposed to be going to Pittsburgh, but I think they're going to meet Henry and Sam in Kansas City instead of Pittsburgh, and then the Kathleen character.
Oh, the Melanie
Linsky, thank you. Yeah,
Linsky character. Yeah.
So maybe we're gonna meet her next week, and that's always fun.
Okay.
To see her.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. I had a good time.
Thanks for doing this, Veronica. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, email the show at Mundane Festival Pod, and we'll talk about it. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next time. Take it easy.